Right, this demonstration is to use Microsoft. Start again. This demonstration is using Adobe Draw. It's just a brief overview on how to use it. So I'm demonstrating it on the iPad at the moment. I'm using my cheapo little stylus. Like I say, you can get these from Amazon for about £6, yeah, or even cheaper than that. Anyway, without further ado, let's open this up. So, open up. The first thing we do is we need to add a new project. Click the plus, and this is important because the format screen will determine the size of the final product of the video. I'm going to use a 1024 by 768, which is a fairly standard monitor size, like we use at our work environment. And so we're now presented with the layout screen. There is, on the left hand side, there's a series of palettes, not palettes, it's the correct word, brushes, different shapes. There's like the palette knife, the blade, if you like, and these other various types of devices. And there's also an eraser as well, which will allow you to rub out anything that you've done. On the top, there's a close gadget, and the project incident is automatically saved. So whenever you close, the changes are saved. Along the top, you've got an undo button. We've got some tools which along here. And we've also got a maximize button, which allows us to maximize the screen. And this is important if you're creating a video and using the capture technique that I described earlier, where the graphic face is being recorded. Obviously you don't want to see all the tools lying around on the face as you're recording your video. So that is a useful one if you're actually creating a video. If you just want to do a drawing, then fine. However you want to do it. Right, it's important at this stage. I just want to talk a little bit about what's called layers. Now at the moment you can see the background screen, and if you imagine layers are like a pack of cards, and you can lay them all on top of each other. You can move their position about relative to each other, and you can make them appear to be like see-through as well, opaque, or fully transparent, in which case that would be visible. You can add layers, and you can move layers around so that the layer appears on top of another layer, and you can change the sequence, etc. So let's start at the base. Let's start at the background of the screen. Well, the default page setting for that is controlled under the toolbar. Go up to the toolbar, and if you can see the little cogwheel, if you click on that, and along the top of here you've got a format which allows you, even within your project, to change the actual screen size that you've chosen. So if I wanted to, I could change to a different screen size. So go back into there again. So the next thing I want to do is I might want to put a grid on. So I can add a grid, and by clicking the add, and there are two types of grids that you can have. I'm just going to choose the bog standard grid, like here, and along the bottom I can actually, by using the minus or the plus, I can step up the size of the grid cells themselves. So I'm just going to go down and say select 20 points. When I'm finished, I can click done. So now the base layer has got a grid on. Now it's quite useful, this. Now as far as I know, you can't change the color of the grid or the base layer itself. However, if you want to create a background color or you can use a background color, or you can create an image as a backdrop. But for most demonstrations, this screen will suffice. So we'll come back to drawing layers later. At the moment, just like to know that we've got a background layer and we've got a draw layer as well, currently set up as well. So let's do some drawing. So if we go over to the left hand side and we look up our brushes, and you can see that there's a little brown mark next to each one, whichever brush is selected. You can also see the colour of the brush, and so whatever you set, you can set each brush up with different attributes. And let's take the first one, and to activate or to access the attributes, we can just click on the single click on the actual tool that we want, and then we can see that we've got the size of the tool, its opacity and its colour. So first things first, I'm just going to alter the size of the tool just to demonstrate the different sizes you can have. And you simply just press on the size and move the cursor down, or you move the cursor up, and if you actually notice above the size of the cursor, there is the size in points, and I think the biggest point you can have is 60. So if I set that to 60, I'll just do a drawing. This is going to be in black. You can see now how large that actually is. I'm going to alter these points now to the smallest, so this is 0.5, so you can see how thin that is, so it's pretty good. You can change your colour by clicking on the colour palette, and if you go into the centre, obviously you're going to be black. Move to the outer edge, select whichever colour you want, but this sliding scale here will give you anything between black and the colour that you've selected. So if you want the full colour, just move that slider bar to the right. If you move the your selection towards the middle, it just becomes a more watered down version of the colour. So the full saturation of the colours at the end. So just select whichever colour you want, the amount of saturation that you want. I'll choose green here, and I'm just going to thicken up my line. I'm just going to choose a let's see, something like that, and then so you can see, and just notice as whatever the order that you draw, actually because I drew the black down first, I'm drawing over in green, and that's how that works. So if you make a mistake, you've got the undo tool here at the top, so if you click on that, that will undo. Unfortunately there's no redo, so be careful with this, because if you accidentally undo something, and you didn't want to do it, you have to draw that bit again. There is no magic redo, unfortunately. Okay, just one other thing as well, if you go back to your tool shapes again, let's just take this one. Notice as well its attributes are independent. Now also as well, if you take the tool and you hold, you get extra shapes, if you like, that can be added to it. So if I, for example, if I was to take this shape here and then draw another line, you notice the effect it does. So something to play around with. This can be quite an interesting effect. Let's make the line, the point a little bit smaller. This can be quite good if you're like drawing alpha numerical characters. Oops. And it can make it look a little bit better than your bog standard. Let's just let's take that one there. If I just take a bog standard, oops, I'm going to get the size up. That's it. If I was to do something like that, A, B, C, without that, that's just the sort of two-dimensional shape. It doesn't look, sometimes it can look a little bit better, if you see what I mean, using this method up the top. Anyway, that's just something as well. Right, so what I want to do now is I'm going to add another layer. So let's say this is something that we've created. In fact, let's just chin this off. You can actually hide a layer by, if you go to the right hand side now, you can select the active layer or any other layers that you've got, and if you double tap it, it hides the layer. Now this is quite a useful technique, because you might have something on the layer that you don't want to always be present. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to demonstrate I'm going to create a simple two-dimensional XY axis that I might need for a graph. So I'm going to create a new layer here, So if I click the plus, the little plus button here, and select draw layer, and notice now I've got 2 draw layers and a background as well. So whichever layer I've got selected is the layer that I'm going to be drawing on. I'm just going to select a slightly thinner tool for drawing lines. In fact, let's change the line colour to blue. Okay, done with that. So I'm now on my new layer, and I'm going to introduce you to some of the tools now. On the top of the screen, we've got this tools menu, this menu button here, which is the shapes. Now, this tool is quite useful because this is a ruler, and to operate it, to move it about, you use 2 fingers, and by twisting your fingers you can alter its position and you can slide it. Now I'm going to produce this is a ruler tool. Now it doesn't, as far as I know, allow you to snap to grid, but if you line the edge of the ruler up with your grid lines, let's just say that's there, oops, that's a bit fiddly sometimes. You've got to be a bit careful how you remove your fingers. Okay, that'll do for what I'm concerned about. And what will happen now is this ruler, I can draw anywhere along this line, and my line will snap to the edge of that ruler. So this is quite a useful thing to do if you want to create straight edges rather than just do it freehand. I'm going to flip this around to the 90 degrees position. Now you can't see it. If I do it this way, if you look in the middle, round here, wherever it is, you can see the actual degrees, so that the actual tool is set to. So I'm going to set 0, try and get that for 0 degrees, and then I'll just line up with the edge of that line roughly, and that'll do me. And again, I'm going to use my finger this time. You can use the finger or whatever. If I draw a line, it will snap to the edge of that grid, which is really, really good. Okay, if you draw underneath this, obviously it will snap to the bottom line as well, and I'll just undo that to get rid of that one. And when you finish with the ruler, just click on the X in the middle, and there you have a line. Now if this is, for example, you're taking a lot of time to do this drawing, this particular grid, and you wanted to use this to demonstrate different types of graphs, so the last thing you want is to start drawing on this, putting all your lines, blah blah blah, because now unfortunately that drawing, that grid, has now become contaminated with whatever you've drawn on it. So this is why we have layers. So luckily I can just undo the last, make sure I don't undo too many things. I can now leave that layer intact, and I can bring it up whenever I want. So I can disable it or hide it from view by double tapping its layer. And for example, I can bring up what I had before, which was this mess, and if I wanted to now, I could bring up the layer as well. So there we go, and there's my layer. I'll just hide that for a moment, and I'll hide that, and I'll add another layer now and just draw some more splodges on here. Okay, one other thing you can do, which is quite useful, is if you draw a solid line, in other words, if the lines cross and become an enclosed object, you can click inside by holding inside, and obviously haven't quite completed that. So as long as the 2 lines touch, if you hold down inside, then you get filled with the colour, which is really handy. Now this is where the layers are really good. So if I bring up my graphs layer, for example, in fact, I'll tell you what we'll do. Let's go back to this layer again, and in fact if I change the colour, let's get rid of that. Let's put a different colour down, and if I go, let's use red. Yeah, let's use a red. That'll be good. Right, so let's just put, oops, add a new layer again because I deleted that last layer. Hide that. So we're on the new layer now. So if I just draw another object, a shape like a square, for example, as long as it's enclosed, and then just hold down in the middle, it will fill. Right, let's see what happens when we bring the other layers up again. So let's bring up our graph layer. I just single tap it on there. Now you notice it's actually behind, underneath the last layer. Now if I wanted to make my grid appear on the top, or my graph appear on the top, all I do is I go to the layer and then I just drag it above, and hey presto. So I'm just going to sort on, and I'm just going to bring up this other layer that we had before. So we can also actually, if we had, for example, a layer that, for example, if I wanted to make this red layer here more opaque, what I can do is I can go to opacity. I think will allow me to, I'm not sure of that. No, that's for future tools. Anyway, there's another way I can do this. Go to the layer, and if I click on layer, and it should single click, I think it is. Whoops, that's it. And up comes the layers properties. So if I alter the opacity of that layer now, click off it, and you can see now that that red layer has actually become translucent, or slightly see-through. And obviously if you take that level of opacity right down to 0, then everything on there becomes invisible. So just bringing it up again, and there we've got that. So that's basically layers as well. Now for example, in the background layer, if I turn the background layer off, then this whole image is, if you were to export this as and save it as a GIF file, and you were to place it on top of another drawing, for example, all the background would be transparent. So that's a useful feature if you want to overlay this image, or the combined image, onto another layer. So just to highlight a next point, so for example, so we've got now these 3 layers. Turn that back one off again. Now if I wanted to do some, I'll turn that off as well. If I wanted to just start drawing some graph lines on here, or add data to here, but not contaminate the original layer, like I said before, all I have to do is to bring up a new layer. Okay, but it's important to make sure that the layer that you're going to draw on is selected. So with the underlying blue layer in, if I wanted to draw a graph, for example, and then start plotting loads of stuff on it, and then notice as well, actually, the opacity, because I turned it down previously, it was less than 100%. I've now sort of turned the opacity up as well, so it's a bit brighter. So it's important to note that I've not contaminated the graph, the XY graphics layer, because if I hide this red layer, you can see now that the other layer is uncontaminated. So this is why layers are quite useful. Another thing you can do as well, if you want to, you can bring in put an image layer on, and then select any images that you've got, graphics images. I got one of my cat, and there she is. Sadly no longer with us, little Daisy. She's a beautiful little puss. But like I say, you can click and drag this and put this to whichever layer you want. So I'm going to put this right underneath every other layer. Turn that layer on, turn that layer on, and so she's actually underneath the top there. And again, if I just hold and drag, whoops, above, and then I brought her up one layer, and I brought her up another layer, and fine, up above the, and then finally to the top. Okay, oops, that's it. And now she's on the top. Now if I click on the layer and alter her opacity again, you can see the effect that it has. So even though she's at the top, she's quite opaque, but it can be used, it can be a useful thing. It's just something just to give you an idea of what can be done. So there's a lot of things that can be actually done with this as well. It's a very powerful tool, and there's quite a lot going on there. Just to show you this to maximize the screen and hide the tools, the benefit of that you can see straight away. Now the good thing is if you were demonstrating something and then you wanted to not get rid of that information, if you just drawn a graph, for example, just turn that off, and you wanted to then hide it or whatever, you can actually go to the layer and or just minimize it. You can then go to transform, and you can then sort of like shrink it, you can move it about. This layer as well, you can actually move, and when you've done, click done. You can actually move more than one layer at once as well, so let's just try that. Whoops. If you go transform all layers, then it does everything that's selected. Yeah, obviously if I'd had the other layers selected, then that would have done that as well. So you can see that's quite a useful tool, that is, and then you can put something, whatever you've got, up to the way out of the screen, and then carry on doing with what you're doing. So anyway, that's a bit of an introduction as well. What else have we got in there? This just accesses, turns on and off the layers menu. Also in the tools there, you've got some basic shapes which are quite useful. The French curves are quite good again. I'll just put one of those on and just so you can see. I don't know if that's going to work. Let's just try that one again. I don't think. There we go. And to resize it, you need 2 fingers. Put it where you want. You can rotate it round, and guess what? Your pen just sticks to the edge. Voila! And when you can move it about using 2 fingers, and you can do another one if you want. And then when you finish with the template, just click on the X. So now I've actually got 2 templates, and let's say if you hold in, you can fill in with colour as well. I could sort of like, if you wanted to, have blue in there, for example, that one, and then I could go and fill that one full of blue. So that's quite useful. What else have we got in there as well? Loads of things in there, some shapes, useful shapes, some cutouts as well. That's interesting. Let's have a little look at one of those. Let's pop one of those in. Oh, low battery, and just click that around there. So there you go. You've got something like that. So anyway, but when you're finished, you can either export the image, you can link to a project, you can save it as an image, and or mail it or whatever. Or I think there will be some facility to save. You can save it to a Google Drive or whatever. So you've got loads of ways of exporting the image as well and saving it as well. So that's pretty much all I wanted to discuss. So hopefully that might be something that you could find useful. And if you close the project as well, incidentally if you want to delete a project, there's a blank project there, open it up and close it again. It goes to half size, and then just go into the 3 buttons and click delete project, and there you go. And that's a basic demonstration. I hope you found that useful.